So I said zoning in the modern world, and actually, I hate to tell everybody, but from an architectural and design perspective, the modern world is ancient history. Modern architecture and modern planning was a product of the middle of the 20th century. We're actually in the postmodern world, and have been for about 30 years, 40 years. So living in the postmodern world, there's new thoughts on zoning and things called form-based codes. So going back to those three interrelated concerns that are in land use planning: form, density, intensity, and management, where we have modern conventional zoning, which deals with the uses primarily, and then management and only vaguely about form. We have the risk of abstractions. This image that you see here from a Euclidean zoning perspective is exactly the same as that. The code is agnostic. You could build that or you could build that. If that pencil's better in the initial development phase, this is what a developer is going to build. A form-based code is really talking about being results-oriented. It's about saying, well, this is what we actually want to see occur, so let's figure out a way to ensure that this is what the private sector delivers. So form-based codes are really dealing with form as the principal concern. And of course, there's still a management component because we're dealing with a partnership between the public sector and the private sector in order to get development done. Every development we've ever seen in the entire life, every building is really a public-private partnership. You wouldn't be able to access that, house on 50 acres in the middle of nowhere in East Charlotte County unless there was a road to get there, and that road was produced by the public sector. Every private development is a public-private partnership. So the form-based code is really based on this concept of the transect. And transect is really something that comes from ecology. This is an example of an ecological transect. This is the Canaveral National Seashore. This is actually a very famous drawing in the foundation of the formation of what we call new urbanism and form-based coding. And they were looking at the transect of nature from the Atlantic Ocean to the Intercoastal Waterway at the Canaveral National Seashore. If you flip this over the other way and rename the Atlantic Ocean the Gulf of Mexico, this is Southwest Florida. This is what it looks like, traditionally. The built transect, the form-based code, new urbanist transect, is really about the relationship of rural to urban. As we move along the transect, we go from more rural to more intensely urban. Where this may be, the DRGR in southeast Lee County, just east of FGCU, this may be downtown Fort Myers. So form-based code and the smart code transect really starts to create a systematic way to discuss what that transect is and how to build communities from the natural zone all the way to the urban core and even special districts. So if we were coding Lee County right now, downtown Fort Myers would be urban core T6, and let's say 40, it doesn't look like this, 41, between downtown Fort Myers and Edison Mall is probably more like this urban general like this. And then FGCU is really a special district, an assigned district, because it's a university. It has its own special set of design considerations. From that big scale, regional scale of the transect, they zoom into a regulating plan. It's like, how do you want the city to look block by block? what areas are critically important, what's the transportation infrastructure. Near a station, we may want uses that are more intense and dense than a little bit further out, you know, a 10-minute walk away from that station. And then, you know, gradually flattening out from there. In a form-based code, as I said, they're really geared towards building forms. In a typical form-based code, you'll see things like this, these drawings about how to build the structure in relationship to the public realm, the street, how you would build an apartment or a townhouse, you know, the private realm, the sidewalk, the semi-public realm of the porch or stoop, and then the actual private space of the building. And also regulating, you know, the block structure and the street format. In zoning codes, remarkably enough, they very rarely, if ever, talk about streets. Streets are like 90+% of the public realm in North America. You know, outside of the sort of national state park system, environmental lands. Most land owned by the public, controlled by the public sector, is in right-of-ways. So it's those streets. And we should be really more careful about how we design those streets, because it provides the platform on which private development will occur. So public realm standards are extremely important in form-based codes. And then often in form-based codes, you'll have examples of building types, you know, like how you should really construct, because architecture and planning and engineering design, landscape architecture, we've really forgotten because of the automobile. We've forgotten how to build traditional buildings. For thousands of years, humans lived in buildings that were like this, you know, a corner store with some living units in there. That's a form that you find all the way back to the beginning of, urban habitation, the beginning of cities, the beginning of agriculture. And we don't do those anymore. We make them illegal. So we have to resurrect that lost art of building towns in these form-based codes.